There are a ton of political podcasts on the internet. A lot of them lean to the left. A lot of them lean to the right. So predictable. But not this one, shooting you straight between the eyes with the truth. This is the Middle Ground Podcast. From Murfreesboro, Tennessee, for Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Rutherford County, this is the Middle Ground Podcast, and this is AnswerFancher.
Hello, welcome in, guys. How are you doing out there? It's good to see you. Good to see you logged on. Sorry about the change of times. If you're listening on the podcast, well, it's whatever time you decided to download it, isn't it? But if you're watching me live on any of the social medias out there, I am on a little bit different today. Life is like that, kids, things of that nature. But hey, I've got a great show for us today. I got lots of good stuff to talk about, and I'm ready to get this thing going here. First up, Bitcoin crossed $57,000. I think when I first started talking about Bitcoin on this podcast, it was below 20. I think when I first started buying Bitcoin, it was around less than 2,000 at the time. And, Bitcoin was like the one chance for every libertarian to get rich. Like, absolutely. And I missed it. I did. But the interesting thing about Bitcoin is, it's crossed 57,000. So it's really high right now, right? At least historically speaking, it's really high. But some of the numbers I've been running, and if you're watching the news, people are talking about, I saw someone predicting that Bitcoin could be 4 million a coin by the time it's done making this run. If it were to reach 4 million a coin, that's pretty crazy, right? We'd be talking about Satoshis and things of that nature instead of Bitcoin all of a sudden. Satoshis are the kind of like the pennies to the dollar. Satoshis are the divisible parts of the Bitcoin. So you guys know. Anyway, currently the market, the entire market of Bitcoin makes up around 1 trillion. We crossed over that mark, the 1 trillion mark. And so that's a big number. I am not of the belief that it'll go to 4 million, but I do believe that it will keep rising. It looks like it's going to hit 100,000 before the end of the year. So doubling from here would be my expectation personally. Let's see. So, there are some that are saying that it'll go higher for it to equal the same market capitalization as gold. Because a lot of people compare Bitcoin to gold. For it to equal gold's market cap today, gold's market cap of people holding gold as an investment only is $2.7 trillion. So, Bitcoin's currently at 1 trillion. That means they would have to basically triple in price to get to around $140,000 to equal where gold is right now, right? So it's got a long way to go before it passes gold. That's for sure. A lot of people are like, well, why are you so big on Bitcoin? Why are you such a fan? What I like about Bitcoin is that it has, it's the free market at work, right? There were people who felt like money was being manipulated, funny money, right? Fiat money being printed out of nothing, right? Just so you guys know, the Federal Reserve, just printed $100 billion earlier this week, right? Was another 100 billion printed up. So, and the Federal Reserve no longer, it doesn't, the dollars aren't backed by gold, right? We used to have a gold-backed dollar. The Federal Reserve, that prints our monies, right, is it's backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. So the U.S. government prints the money as they need it, right? And so the goal of the Federal Reserve, it has a dual mandate. The mandate is for it to have a growing economy, right, with steady prices. They want near full employment, and they want prices to be fairly stable. And so, in other words, predictable inflation, which brings me to my next topic, inflation. I believe and have believed for a long time that inflation is coming. We keep asking for it. We keep pushing for it. The Fed wants it. And then our government needs it, right? Because it's we're a debtor nation. We have tons of debt. Inflation is good for people who are in debt. It's bad for people who are saving. So if you're one of those guys that have been playing by the rules, if you've been watching Dave Ramsey and doing all the things he's been telling you to do all these years, not use a lot of debt, save up, right? Then, the idea of inflation is not going to be good for you unless you are well diversified. You have a portfolio of investments and things of that nature. Who this was likely to hurt the most will be your people who are retired, whose incomes will not be able to keep up, not be able to rise with the rise in prices that occurs. Some of the things that are causing inflation, in my opinion, we have, of course, that the Federal Reserve is printing lots of money. And so the more dollars you put into the economy, same amount of goods, more dollars causes prices to rise, that kind of thing, right? But there's also some other things, like other factors. We have, because of COVID, we've had the economy is changing. And so that's the demand for things is changing. And so that can cause things to rise. We've got weather that has caused prices to rise, electricity and gas, way more expensive than it has been because of the need. We had as the demand rises, of course, if there's not enough supply to keep up with that, then you're going to have prices rise, right? And in our case, we've had a lot of pipelines shut down, thanks Biden administration. And so when you have that happen, you're going to have less supply. Less supply tied to more demand means really high prices or possibly a shortage, which is what we've seen across our country is a lot of shortages. I mean, in like places like in New York City, if you're going to go out to eat, you have to eat outside. If you're eating outside in this time of year in New York, you're going to need heat. A lot of those places use propane, different forms of gas. And so that, we have a greater demand for propane. You have this cold weather and then all of a sudden more people, I'm pretty sure my parents heat their house with propane. And so they're using more. And so you see that prices rise, but still leads to some bit of a shortage. And so that causes a lot of problems. When that happens, people are going to then pass those costs along to consumers, and consumers are then going to pass that along eventually to their employers and ask for more money. And so that's how you get this inflation going, those kind of things right here, rising prices and all of a sudden workers asking for more. Another thing that could cause it is if the federal if government steps in and says, hey, we're going to double minimum wage to $15 an hour. All of a sudden you have even more pressures on the economy to raise prices and therefore get this inflation going. The interesting thing about inflation, and then I'll move on to some other issues. The interesting thing about inflation is inflation seems to be very hard to get going. It's very, very hard to get going because inflation is kind of like a mindset, right? Because what matters is what we think prices are going to be in the future. Because all of us are trying to run our own individual economies. We're all trying to figure out how best to maximize the money we have so that way we can have the great things that we put in our life, right? And so if we have those things, we're trying to decide how can we best save our money? How can we best spend our money to maximize our happiness? Not only today, but some of us are planning for tomorrow and planning for retirement, things of that nature. And so when you've had near zero inflation, like we've had for the past, 20 years, where you've had very little inflation, very stable currency, you all of a sudden, you no longer think that inflation is a worry. You don't think it's concern, right? And it's so the furthest thing out of your mind. And so it takes a while for people to get that back into the thing, right? When I first got into financial planning many, many moons ago, like over 20 years ago, we always used inflation at 3 to 5%. That's the very beginning. You put that in, you counted on that. That was a starting point. I got in 2001 and got out, after that, but I never saw 3% inflation while I was doing financial planning, even though I've been planning for it, right? And so you had this long period of time where there's no inflation. And so people kind of stopped planning for it. They stopped worrying about it, stopped asking for raises to keep up with it. The COLA, the cost of living adjustment that goes with Social Security, that's been so little and so low that, Social Security hasn't grown either. And so people just haven't expected it. And now all of a sudden, I worry once we start getting inflation, it's going to take a little while before people start going, well, inflation is here and I need to start worrying about it. And so all of a sudden it takes a while. But once it's in place, it's really hard to tap that back down, right? Because all of a sudden it speeds up. The way you fight inflation is through high living. Really, that's what Milton Friedman said. It said that you got to have high living to deal with inflation because you can't save, right? If you save $1 today and inflation is eating away at its value, you're going to have $2 in the future to pay for the dollar you had today. So it's way better to go buy something. When we've had hyperinflation in this world. Hyperinflation is where you have inflation that gets out of control. Like prices are changing rapidly, so rapidly that people don't even put prices on things anymore. Normally they put stickers on them and they say this color means this, and you got to go look at the board to see how much that means. But anyway, that's what happens in economy sometimes is normally happens where you have a government that's printing a lot of money and puts it into the hands of the people. All of a sudden prices get out of control. Anyway, the issue once that happens is that assets matter way more than the cash, right? And so the story I remember hearing as I was growing up, learning about the mark before World War II when it crashed and burned, right, is that people you take a wheelbarrow of money to go buy a loaf of bread, right? Because it took so much currency, you had to put it all in a wheelbarrow and stack it way up, right? And so you had to carry that. And then, but the robber would come along, smack you in the back of the head, and he wouldn't take your cash. He'd take your wheelbarrow, right? Because your wheelbarrow continued to climb in value, whereas your cash is losing value, right? And so what we saw in Venezuela, the most recent country to deal with hyperinflation, is that people would still got paid in their Venezuelan dollars because the government required it, right? And so they got paid this. They would go and instantly go change their money over into another currency, normally the dollar. Then when they'd go shop, they'd have to change it back to the Venezuelan currency. And then after they got done shopping, any change they had left over, they would immediately change it back over into some other currency so that way they could try to preserve the value. Remember what money is for. What's money for? It's for keeping score, right? It's for keeping up with how much work you've done. You want your money to hold on to the value that you placed into it, the effort and the work that you put into it. You want to be able to one day get out later. That's the goal of money. And that's what money's supposed to do. It's supposed to be the stable value. So if I work 2 hours today and I save this money and then, go to use it 10 years from now, right? Because for whatever reason, I don't want to go work that day, right? So I take that money that I saved and I can replace those hours. And so that makes it best for people. And I'm getting a few comments here. Ross is talking about how he's interested in inflation and things like that. A lot of libertarians pay attention to this because and I don't even know if Ross considers himself a libertarian, but a lot of libertarians do pay attention to this because it's like it's the final straw, in my opinion, that's going to break the back of people is when they say that the government has so much control over people's lives because they control your money. And therefore, if they control your money, they control your labor. And so there's a real issue, a real rub right there. So anyway, that's and there's a lot of people that say that's why you're seeing Bitcoin rise in value is because people are looking for other ways to save their money, save their US dollars in other forms. I tell people that the only free lunch is a diversified portfolio, right? There is no free lunch. But the only way to get one is to diversify yourself. And so if you have savings, you got to realize that inflation is coming. This monster is going to come and it's going to eat away at your buying ability. And so I'm telling people everywhere to diversify. If you've got all your money in dollars, that's a problem because stocks will rise, assets will rise, but your dollars, what they can buy will go down over time in an inflationary economy. And the Fed has said for the longest time that it wants an inflationary economy and they got their foot on the accelerator. They're going to press it until they get it. And then how do you get rid of inflation? Anybody know? Anybody out there? Anybody read Paul Volcker's book? He got rid of inflation. He raised the interest rates up to, I think it was 19% to finally tap down inflation. And so do you think our economy has the ability to push to hit the brakes in such a manner to raise short-term interest rates up to 18%? I don't think anyone has the ability to do that. I just don't. I don't know if the American people can handle it. I don't know. And so I expect inflation to occur. And I think that the Federal Reserve, their plan is to manage the inflation and to keep it under control. But there's this cartoon, and I wish I could find it. I remember when I was like studying economics at Western Kentucky, there was this. It was talking about inflation, and it had this dragon in a bottle, and in that bottle was this dragon, and on him was written inflation, right? And then there were people standing around there threatening to break open that bottle to get that inflation out. And I think that the issue is that once inflation gets out, man, it is hard to get it back in the bottle because that dragon can grow really large, really fast. And they are underestimating. I think the Fed is underestimating its ability to keep that dragon in the bottle. And the sad part is it's regular people, it's poor people that are going to be hurt the most. We see this when economies lose control of their dollar, when that happens, dollar, their currency, when that happens, it's regular folks that hurt the most, right? It's the people that were the last to change, the ones that held on to their dollars the longest, didn't have assets to protect them, didn't have stocks, bonds, other currencies. When I went, golly, I keep going on this subject here, but when I went down to Mexico as an undergrad, so I stayed with a host family. And if you have kids, encourage them to study abroad. It helped me grow the most. I owe Dan Myers, Dr. Dan, the most gratitude ever for making sure that I went on that trip. It opened up my mind, my world. It changed me forever. But one of the first things that happened when I got to Mexico was that my host family bought all my dollars from me. Now, why would they want to buy their dollars from me? Well, number one, I didn't charge them an exorbitant fee to change over their pesos into dollars, right? Which is what a money changer would do. But what they were doing was they were putting that money into savings. They had lived through the Mexican peso crisis of 96. This was the year 2000 when I was down there, 99, 2000. And so can you imagine waking up and the decimal point has been moved on you? And that's what happened in Mexico. They moved the decimal point on the people. And so all of a sudden, if you had a lot of debt, you had less debt. And if you had a lot of cash, you had less. I mean, it bought less, and it was overnight that it happened. And when you read about what happened in Venezuela, a very similar thing happened in Venezuela. The central bank one day stepped in, boom, changed it, moved the decimal, and people got hurt. Regular people got hurt the most because they own less assets, right? And it hurts regular people the most. What you see in those kind of situations is you see this split where you had in these Latin American countries, you had the emergence of a middle class that was occurring, and then all of a sudden you had a split. You're either of the haves or you're of the have-nots. And I worry greatly about that. We're going to see this split here when this happens here. And so, anyway, I appreciate you guys listening to me go on and on about inflation. It's just a concern of mine, and I think that it links to lots of other issues. Banking and money matter, and so few people pay attention to it. All right, so let's talk about Tennessee state politics, shall we? What's going on in Tennessee right now? This past week, the governor had the state of the state. Funny thing is, the governor did not come out and brag about some of the things that Tennessee is low or near the bottom at. For instance, we are low or near the bottom at infant mortality. We are low or near the bottom at poverty. We're one of the top places for opioid overdoses. We are one of the lowest states in education funding. We are, let's see, what is it? Some other things I wrote down. Number one in medical bankruptcy. And so, it's just our economy, as good as it is, it's also really bad for a lot of people out there. And so I really do worry about the rural areas of Tennessee and how they're getting left behind. And I don't think that a lot of people care about it. You see that most of your elected representatives that are from these rural areas, they mostly pay attention to the wedge issues. They are there for social. They're elected for social issues, and so they care more about the social issues. And so you see Tennessee continue to be a very conservative state on lots of social issues. For instance, like marijuana, right? Like the ball can't be moved on any type of medical marijuana whereas all the states around us are moving toward it. And so it's going to be a shame when people are having to leave Tennessee because of medical reasons to get the medicine that they need. And I just wish that Tennessee would start moving toward it. But I don't see that happening. Again, I think that relates back to a lot of our reps are elected on social issues. And so this is an issue that a lot of them are willing to, die on. And so they have said that they are willing to move. If the federal government is willing to move on it, then it's possible that Tennessee could move on it. But can the federal government do anything anymore other than, look, the federal government can do a lot. It does a lot through the president doing its executive orders, through the Federal Reserve printing money, and coming up with other ways to get stimulus into the system. It'll be interesting to see what exactly Congress does pass as far as this last round of COVID relief. Hopefully the last. Golly, they keep just creating all kinds of money out there. Just crazy. There's a lot of juice in the system, man. A lot of juice in the system. So anyway, so Tennessee has a lot of issues that the governor doesn't really seem to talk about, doesn't seem to care about. And even our own state reps, they have their own pet issues. But really, I don't think that they're trying to tackle poverty. I don't think that they're trying to deal with some of these other issues. And then you have what's left of the Democrat Party, and they're pushing for a higher minimum wage. And that's just going to cripple the rural counties even more. I mean, it's going to smash them. And so anyway, very, very disappointing at the state level. Let's see. And one of the things that I thought was interesting at the state level is that Dolly Parton is even more my hero now. The state legislature was trying to erect a statue of Dolly Parton. And look, if anybody in the state of Tennessee deserves a statue for what they've done for Tennessee, it's definitely Dolly Parton, no doubt in my mind. But she said, not at this time. And I think that's very honorable, right? Because you see so many people who are of positions of power and they want these accolades and things of that nature while they're alive. And I'm just of the belief that you don't name people, don't name bridges, don't name roads, don't name buildings after people while they're alive. You don't build statues of people while they're alive. You wait until they're gone, and then you let their memory live on in these statues and these bridges and things of that nature. Anyway, that's just my own pet peeve personally. But Dolly evidently feels like I do, because she says not at this time does she need a statue. And so yay, Dolly. Good job. Once again, Dolly proves that she's a superhero. Let's see here. Did you guys hear that Trader Joe's is coming to Middle Tennessee? Wait for my Murfreesboro peeps to fire in, because we've been begging for a Trader Joe's. It's like Facebook fire, man. Facebook fire for you to talk about Trader Joe's, and everybody in Murfreesboro thinks that we need one, and everybody wants one, needs and wants. It's like having a talk with kids, but it's not coming to Murfreesboro. We missed out. It's going to the Cool Springs area, and that's I think that Murfreesboro may have to declare war on Franklin, may have to declare war on Williamson County, because we want the Trader Joe's. Let's just face it, we do. But we're not going to get it. You know why Murfreesboro, why Rutherford County does not get a Trader Joe's? Anybody? Because we don't have enough college degrees. That's what it really boils down to. It's really a shame when you think about how we have Middle Tennessee State University here, and we have so few college degrees in our county. Hopefully that'll improve over time. But I mean, if you look at even our state reps and our on down, like we don't elect highly educated people. I really, I think it goes back to our blue collar roots here in Rutherford County. And so we don't value education as much as we probably should. And so, and maybe Tennessee in general, maybe Tennessee doesn't value education as it should. And that would explain why we're so low on education funding. I don't know. There's something to be said there, though. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about? Oh, hey, Parler's back up. Are you guys on Parler? I am. AnswerFancher. You can follow me there. Look, the reason I like Parler is not because of the whole that I believe in shadow banning or anything like that. But I do like to see the free market work, and I love for people to have choices. And so anytime we can get choices, I think choices is good. And so I'm totally in favor of that. I hope you guys are too. If you're on Parler, follow me and I'll follow you back. If you're on Twitter, follow me and I'll follow you back. Both places, my handle's AnswerFancher. Let's see here. I saw a report that came out that said, CBS News, a real hardcore news outlet, sent a message to all of our senators in the U.S., right? And they asked the senators, do you think Trump won the election? And only 5 senators responded. And, now, look, I probably wouldn't have responded either. But the question is, do you think, is that news? That's the real question. Is that news? And I don't think that's journalism, man. The fact that people didn't respond is not journalism. That just means, I don't know, maybe you didn't have the right email address or something. But I have a problem with that. So look, I have a problem with journalism. That's why I do my podcast, because I feel like we have some issues in journalism. And so I'm trying to educate people on things that I know about, right, that I don't see being talked about very widely. And so I try to bring that to you guys and let you hear my opinion on it, give you guys a chance to respond. And, if you ever want to come on the show, let me know. I'll bring you on and we can talk back and forth. That's fine by me. Let's see. Anything else going on in the state? The Democrats are really upset. So when we had the State of the State, the Democrats then got the chance to rebut what the governor had to say for the State of the State. I thought one of the most interesting things that the Democrats are talking about is that Tennessee is rejecting, telling Joe Biden and his administration no on some of the funding that they are offering for Tennessee to expand Medicaid. Now, I don't think that the federal government belongs in healthcare. I don't. But it is, right? And people have been contributing to Medicaid and Medicare, and we've got tax dollars going toward all that stuff. Here's the issue. In Kentucky, they take that money and they provide more care for their people than Tennessee is providing for their own people. Now, the issue there is you got rural hospitals all across Tennessee that are going out of business. Why are they going out of business? Because so many people in Tennessee don't make a lot of money and they can't afford health insurance, and the government isn't providing them any form of health insurance. And so therefore they don't buy it and they don't have it. And so when they go to the hospital and they have to give them care, they have no way of paying it. And that's why you go back, we're the number 1 state in medical bankruptcy. And so we're also a state where rural hospitals cannot stay in business. They just can't. And so that's a problem, but that's where we are. And so I think a lot of these things tie together, right? Our state is sitting on $1 billion rainy day fund. I don't think it's the government's job to save money in my name or your name or anybody else's name. I don't think the state needs a rainy day fund. You know why the state doesn't need a rainy day fund? If the state needs money, they can just tax us, right? They can come to us and be like, hey, you owe us some money. And so instead, our elected representatives and all their great wise knowledge, right? They're like, we're going to save this money in case we have a rainy day. We'll have this fund we can reach into and we can use this money in case we need it. I don't know if it's not raining right now is my question. Then when is it raining? What could we use this rainy day fund for? It's $1 billion. It could go a long, long way, right? But, the issue, in my opinion, is that the state government doesn't need a savings account. Our state doesn't build roads on debt, right? So we don't have to fund that debt. We run a very tight budget. I don't think we need to have a savings account. I just don't. And I think we ought to return that money back to the taxpayers. We ought to send that money out. That ought to be the state of Tennessee could have a great stimulus program by taking that $1 billion and sending the cash out to the people. Hey, and we'd fund more of this inflation I'm worried about, right? If they took that $1 billion and put it back into the economy. Anyway, and I bet I could find a economist somewhere that would say that there'd be a multiplier effect on that. And in fact, the left loves this. They talk about the multiplier effect. If the government spends money, It'll increase the ability for us to people. It'll increase the ability for people to spend. And so therefore the taxes will be collected. It'll more than pay for itself. Ask, oh man, I shouldn't say this. Ask Shane McFarland about those soccer fields, will you? About how much, the multiplier effect that we get on all the things we buy here at our city level. Look, let's be honest. The multiplier effect is debunked many times over. It's not real. It doesn't happen. There's no free lunch, man. There's no way that the government can go and spend money and get that back in a way that would be economical. Otherwise, they do even more of it, right? I know, so here's the argument that someone would give to me. They'll be like, there's diminishing returns on that money. The first dollar produces this much. And if we can magically somehow calculate it so that we hit it just right, if we're so perfect with it, not only can we get that money back, we'll get that money back and some. Nobody gets that ever. It just doesn't happen. I love this. Absolutely return it to the people. Whenever we can get Daniel Gaiman to run for an office, that'd be awesome. My kind of guy right there. My kind of guy. Let's see. What else are we talking about today? So we talked about that. I'm checking off my list here. Oh, so in Tennessee, it's legal to gamble. Did you guys know that? You can go online. You can legally gamble. Sports betting, right? Still can't play poker in the house, right? If I invite you guys over and we sit down and we play some poker, it's still illegal in Tennessee. Although I have it on, I've been told that our attorneys here in the county wouldn't prosecute a good poker game. Still, I don't play as much poker because of it. I really don't. I just don't. And so I would love to see our state get rid of the poker laws that we have personally. But here's what the state did instead. They legalized sports gambling, and they also legalized the ability to loan money to sports gamblers inside of these establishments. So you can go and you can sports gamble, and inside that same sports gambling place, you can ask for a marker, right? Do you guys know what a marker is? Marker is where you say, hey, I need some money from the casino, and the casino says, here's you some money, go gamble. So that's legal in Tennessee, right? And so the problem is that really sets people up for a bad situation, right? I mean, I'm all for freedom and I'm all for it. And I am even fine with this. But I do think that those elected officials who go to the state thumping their Bibles, right, talking about how, they love God, things of that nature, they really need to stand there and look in the mirror when they set this up. And they set this machine up to eat people up because that's what it's going to do. It eats people up. When you set it up, you got to understand that it's going to do this. And if you're going to give people freedom, then keep giving it to them. Give them more, right? And so, but yeah, Ross comes up with a great point here. He says that the nonprofits need the bingo bill to pass, right? How crazy is this? So you can start your own sports gambling thing, right? And then you can run your own loan shark inside of it, right? But a nonprofit can't have a bingo game. Does that make sense? I wonder why. Why do you think that the state won't allow people to play bingo for cash? Any ideas? Well, because it'd take away from the lottery, of course, and we don't want to take money away from the lottery. That thing makes the state a lot of money. And so anytime there's some cannibalism that's going to take place in here where you're going to, if you allow people more freedom to gamble, they're going to gamble in lots of other areas. And so that's an issue. I get that. But I'm like, if you're going to start freeing people up, then let's free them up to do lots of other things. Free me up so I can play poker. That'd be awesome. That's, I love poker. It's a game of strategy. You can ask, what was his name? From Tombstone, right? He said that it's not a gambling game. Anyway. One of the last things about the state that I want to talk about is that Kroger is closing stores. Have you guys heard that Kroger is closing in Murfreesboro? We're closing the store. It's over next to MTSU. Now, look, there's a reason why Kroger is closing stores. One of the reasons they're closing stores is because in some states, they are mandating that people that work inside grocery stores receive higher pay because they are like frontline workers, basically, right? So they couldn't stop working when the pandemic set in. And so they're saying, hey, we're mandating you have to pay these people better. And, there's arguments on both sides about that. Maybe they should start a union or something like that, and then they could ask for higher wages. That's it. Yeah, thank you, Doc Holliday. That's right. Doc Holliday said that poker is an honest game, And so I happen to agree with Doc Holliday. Let's see. So Kroger is closing, but so I'm walking around these newer Krogers. I'm shopping there. The reason I went shopping there is because the Walmart across the street from my house closed because of the snow, and Publix also closed early. And so I drove over to Kroger's, and I'm walking around, and you're exactly right, Ross. He said the automated cashier is coming. Look, the automated grocery store is coming. It's so close. Every aisle now has a camera on it. Every one. I was walking through this new Kroger's. They're remodeling it. Every aisle has an eye in the sky, and so they're not going to need people. They'll need one person to work that camera, right? One person to work the door, and then that's all they're going to have to do. And they're just going to, and then eventually you're not even going to need someone to work the camera, right? You're going to have AI that's able to take care of the camera. And so you're going to have these grocery stores that all you're going to pay are these stockers, basically people to stock the shelves, and people to, tackle people if they run out. But if you're heading that direction, if you're going that way, right, you're going to start looking for ways, where can you say which stores are most profitable, which ones are not, and why. And then that's going to lead to some store closures. And that's what we're seeing Kroger do, is they're closing stores that are less profitable. And sadly, that store over there next to MTSU, not very profitable. We all know why, right? Because it's not in a very good neighborhood, a lot of low income housing right around it. I mean, it's next to campus, which is beautiful. And it's crazy. It blows my mind that there's so much low income housing over there, but it was how the city was designed and laid out, things of that nature. And so it has its own problems there. And so you have that problem, and now all of a sudden you're going to have another, what do they call it? A desert, right? A grocery desert. There's a term that the left uses about these places where you can't get fresh food, and they call them deserts. But if you're a walking person, right? If you live close to that, you're going to have a harder time. I do think that someone will eventually buy that area, put a grocery store over there if the demand needs it. But they're going to pay more. It's going to be more expensive. I look for it to be more of like a gas station, something like that, smaller footprint. Evidently, Kroger's is keeping their gas station there, and they're keeping their pharmacy there. So those are two things that seem to be working for them. Any reasons why they might keep them? Anyone out there? What do you think? Number one, let's start with the gas station. Everybody uses gas, right? And that doesn't change. And so therefore the gas station, and it's hard to steal gas, right? And we have lots of actually really tough laws in Tennessee about stealing gas. So a gas station is a money maker, man, just money maker, low cost for people to run it. Walmart next to my house has 24 hours. The demand and profit versus loss due to crime. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. The other thing is pharmacy is they're keeping open, right? And again, a pharmacy, for the most part, anything of real value is behind the glass there, so it's hard to get to. And it's also funded by the government. So if you had the economy go down, you still have people that are able to get a lot of a lot of their medicine, I bet they sell in that store, is paid for with government programs, transfer payments of some sort. And so they would keep those two. The problem with the model that Kroger is moving forward there, with the gas station still there, with the pharmacy still there, is that they've kept the high end areas of the store there, but then they've got rid of the lower end as far as like margins go. Grocery margins are really tight, tough business, right? Pharmacy, evidently, gas station, not as tight, not as tough. But that keeps someone from moving in and putting a new grocery store there, right? Because they won't be able to compete with those two areas, right? That would be a great location for someone to come in and run a grocery store. If they could put a pharmacy in, if they could put a gas station in, then maybe they can make it work. Maybe they'd be willing to deal with those lower margins on the grocery. But I don't see it happening if Kroger keeps that footprint there. Evidently, our city council is concerned about this. I've seen that they're wanting to make some changes, wanting to do something to try to save that Kroger's. I think that's Kurt Wade is the guy who was talking about that. So if I were you and you have an opinion about that, I'd reach out to Kurt Wade and let him know how you feel about it. It's called free market, man. And there are things that the government can do to try to free up that area. You could make a special economic zone in that area, right, where you lower some of the different barriers to entry that we put on the businesses. We could get rid of different business taxes that we levy on them, lower different property taxes that we have in that area for businesses. And so all of a sudden you could create like an environment that would be more conducive for businesses to move into that area. If the city's going to do something, that's what they should do. And not just hand cash out, right? Like, I think let's create economic free zones inside of our city to try to get people to move there, because I think that there is freedom, there's prosperity, and where there's prosperity, there's people that are happy. And really, if you're in government, isn't that what you want? Is happy people? That's what I would want. So, all right. What else? Anything left for me to cover? I saw somebody say something about President's Day, which was this past week, right? We got snow for President's Day, and then we got a whole week out. Woohoo! But President's Day is a national holiday. But why isn't Election Day? It's a great question. I mean, in Tennessee, we vote, I don't know, about 4 or 5 times a year. It seems like there's an Election Day that comes along ever so often, right? But what if we moved all the election days to November, at least as many as we could, move it to November as best we can, and then we make that a national holiday so everybody gets Election Day off, everybody could vote. That'd be great. I'm all for this. I think it's a great idea. Let's make that a national holiday. Let's get rid of President's Day and let's move it to or let's move President's Day to Election Day. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, why is it in February anyway? I don't know. Anyway, there's that. Look, I'd be amiss if I didn't talk about President Trump, right? Because it'll get all of a sudden my likes will start going up, and then people start getting mad at me because I'm talking about President Trump. And all of a sudden I got viewers coming at me. So I got to talk about Trump. He was acquitted yet again. And I'm going to close out the show on Trump because I've been going at it for a little while here. So President Trump was acquitted once again, right? He's the only president to ever. It's Washington's birthday. Thanks, Ross. President's Day is after Washington. Our first president, probably our greatest in my opinion. But anyway, that's a different story for another day. Let's talk about one of that I think we can all agree is not the greatest of all time, and that would be Donald Trump. He is the first president to ever be twice impeached, right? But he's also the first president to beat it twice, right? I always felt like putting this guy up for impeachment after he's out of office is the wrong thing to do. Why? Because the best thing for the country at this point is to let Trump ride off into the sunset, in my opinion, than to give him a voice. The reason I bring him up today is not only did he beat those charges, get acquitted, get off, right? But he's also been making rounds. He's been doing interviews again. But the interesting thing is that his interview on YouTube was removed. And so they're removing a lot of Trump interviews from YouTube. The reason is because of community standards, right? So, and also this week, so we had Rush pass, right? So Rush passed away, and when Rush got really popular, he was like the first of all the talk show people, to really be famous. He was getting 20 million people listening to him. He's the reason Newt Gingrich was able to drag Bill Clinton along, in my opinion. It's like that was Rush's doing, right? And so not Rush Limbaugh. And so Rush, passes away, but he had to deal with the fairness doctrine. And the fairness doctrine idea was that if you're going to have time for people on the right to talk, you got to have time for people on the left to talk, right? And so the FCC would have been the one implementing this. It never passed or anything like that, as far as I know. But the interesting thing is that these community standards that we have now are trying to accomplish what the fairness doctrine, I think, was really wanting to do. The fairness doctrine wanted to balance out the left and the right because the right was controlling the airwaves, basically, right? And so the left was like, well, if we can balance this out, then maybe we can make it better. But anyway, the issue here is that these community standards say that if you say that if you allege that fraud took place in the election, you are fine to say that. But if you say that fraud took place in the election and it led to the changing of the outcome of the election for the 2020 U.S. presidential election, they'll boot you off. And so it's possible that I'm live right now, but this recording may not be available later because I just tied those two things together. You see that? And so the community standards say that you can't spread this, you can't lie, basically can't spread these rumors and things of that nature. When Trump goes on an interview and someone asks him the question, do you think that the election was stolen from you? He says that he thinks that the election was stolen from him. And like I mentioned earlier, none of the senators care to answer that question. And I think that's because of these community standards, right? So what we have is that our public squares, our internet public squares are being they're being controlled a bit, right? About as far as what people can say. And I'm of the belief, if I believe in free speech and I believe that people should be allowed to say just about anything. Do I believe in anything? I do. Actually, I do, because I can turn it off. I don't have to listen to them. And so that's, I think freedom is dangerous. I agree with that statement. I believe in that statement, and I'm fine with that statement. I believe that freedom should be dangerous. And I believe that our elected officials should serve the people. And when they are not serving them, they should leave. Right. And anyway, that's, I'm afraid that we're heading into an area where people can't say what they feel anymore. You're going to have to like tiptoe through the tulips to get your points across, to say what you really feel. And so I think that leads to a problem because it pushes down bad ideas and then people talk about them secretly. Right. And they don't talk about them openly. Yeah, I agree. Free speech is not hate speech. And, Ross, I'll be honest, I side with, like, I don't have a problem with hate speech. I know it's probably going to come across really wrong, but I don't want to be the person that's in charge of deciding what is hate speech. Are you against stupid speech? Are you against idiots speaking out? I'm just not. I think that we should allow people to open their mouths. And if you say something hateful, people should turn you off. They should not listen to you anymore, right? And they should have the freedom to do that. So I grew up in a family where, I was born in the 70s, so I grew up in the 80s, right? And we forget how far we have come from then, right? Like the world has changed a lot. What was common in my house is not common there anymore. Right. Off-color jokes, racial jokes, Polak jokes, things of that nature. They were common in my house. They were common all across the U.S. It's not like I grew up in a home that was bad. Right. I didn't. Right. But because it was common for people to make these off-color jokes, but we don't make them anymore. And the reason we don't make them anymore is because we don't want to hurt anybody, right? And my family is diverse now, and it wasn't then. And so you don't make fun of your cousin, you don't unless it's cool, right? Unless you're like, it's a funny joke, like, and we're both laughing and stuff, but you don't say things to hurt. You don't have hate speech inside your house at people you love, right? And so I agree with Ross. People's rights do not end where people's feelings begin. There's a movement afoot to care about feelings and to say that we are responsible for our words and the feelings that we inflict upon others. And I just don't think that's a good place to go. I don't think it's safe. I don't think it's what our founders intended. And I just don't believe in it. And so I'm for free speech, even free speech that hurts people's feelings. I'm totally cool with it. I hope that I don't, right? Because my intention is not to hurt anyone's feelings. I do know that I have said things in the past that have hurt people's feelings. I've said things that I look back on now and I'm embarrassed of, right? Like when I was growing up, the jokes I made in high school, just so embarrassing. And so to those people that I made those jokes, to those people that I've said those things, I have said I'm sorry to, that I've come into contact with. But I feel like there's a process in life where you have to grow. You have to like expose yourself to other cultures and you grow because of that. And I feel like I have, but I've come a long way. And I think the world has come a long way, but I do believe we got further to go. But I don't think the way to get there is by mandating what we can and can't say. That's not how we get there. What we do, the way we get there is by love, right? Is by loving each other, by being examples of what free speech can be, and by, like, when you see it, when you see people saying mean things, you tell them you're not cool with that, right? And that's, and if they want to keep on going, then you walk away. You walk away. You don't turn them on. You don't listen. You don't stop and listen to it. You just keep going. And anyway, that's kind of my feeling. I'm for free speech. I hope you guys are too. This is the Middle Ground Podcast, where I talk about Middle Tennessee politics, and sometimes we talk about federal politics. I thank all of you for tuning in. I really enjoy you guys. Thanks for the feedback, all the people that were live. Look forward to hearing from you. If you want to email the show, MGP, Middle Ground Podcast, MGP at MT615.com. I really like short emails. M as in middle, G as in ground, P as in podcast, at M as in middle, T as in Tennessee, 615.com. You guys can email the show. If you'd like to come on, I'm always looking for a guest to help me run the show, because it's way more fun to bounce ideas off of people. So if you'd like to come on the show, then please let me know. Let's schedule a time. Let's make it happen. Thanks so much for you guys tuning in. This is February, and I will see you guys next week.
You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast, hosted by AnswerFancher. Finally, a political podcast that isn't left or right. It's right down the middle. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and tell a friend or two. That would help also. Coming to you from Middle Tennessee with a political view right down the middle. You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast. See you soon.